Welcome, students, faculty, and staff. It was November 11th, 1918, and fighting had ended on the Western Front of the First World War. While millions of Americans gathered in the streets to celebrate, the day soon turned solemn in remembrance of over 60,000 Americans who were lost. And so began the tradition of Armistice Day, officially recognized in 1919, to honor those who brought about the end of the Great War. Armistice Day continued to be an important part of our national identity, even as the world entered another war in 1939. In the aftermath of the horrors of World War II, however, the day took on additional meaning. So, in 1954, after the return of service personnel from World War II and the Korean War, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a bill renaming November 11th as Veterans Day, encouraging Americans to commit to peace and to honor our veterans for their courage, honor, patriotism, and sacrifice. We can never fully repay our debt of gratitude to the American service members who were wounded or died in battle. We can, however, recognize and thank the veterans still living today. On behalf of the IMSA community, I'm honored to present our Veterans Day celebration. At this time, I'd like to invite Michael Gochi to call the color guard in.
Color guard, attention. May the audience please rise. Color guard, forward march. Color guard, halt. Color guard, please prepare to post the colors. Color guard, post the colors. Audience, salute. Those not in uniform may place their hands over their heart. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. Color guard, return to rank. Color guard, dismissed. May the audience please remain standing.
At this time, please join the chamber choir in singing the national anthem. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave?
Thank you to Michael, our color guard, and of course, the chamber choir. Please be seated. Today, it is our privilege to say thank you to all of America's veterans, to let them know we appreciate their service, and to honor them for their sacrifices. We all have a different perspective of American government and policy, but it is critical to recognize the individual veterans who gave so much to us and continue to spend their lives protecting our freedom. On behalf of my classmates and the students of the Illinois Mathematics and Science Academy, we wish to thank all veterans for their service to this country, from the greatest generation to soldiers actively serving across our country and in 150 countries around the world. At this time, I'd like to ask Raghav to join us again.
Hello. I would like to start off by thanking the veterans here today for their service and their bravery for putting their lives on the line for our country. Throughout history, war has served an important purpose in geopolitics. Oftentimes, we see the battles and we analyze the outcomes more than the causes. We forget that each war and battle entered has a specific goal or purpose, a purpose so important that people are willing to risk their lives to ensure this goal is reached. For our veterans, that goal is the protection of democracy and freedom. They fought to preserve not only our human rights, but the human rights of others as well. Freedom is a way of life in the US. We have the freedom to choose how we live our lives, no matter the outcome. Each choice we make has an effect on how we live, which in turn changes the choices we make. Without our freedoms, we would not be able to be who we truly are. Without our veterans protecting these rights and freedoms, we would not be who we truly are today. Near our main entrance, we have the UN Sustainable Development Goals listed on the walls. One of these goals, Goal 16, promoting peace, justice, and strong institutions, is very important. Without peace, justice, and fair institutions, freedom for all is impossible, and people cannot become who they truly are. Without accomplishing this goal, people will continue to be oppressed, and the sacrifices veterans make will be for little. The reason the UN Sustainable Development Goals, like Goal 16, were created is to help ensure that everyone on Earth can have basic human rights, resources, and materials needed to thrive. As we IMSA students progress through our academic careers, I would like to ask that we take a look at ways we can make these goals a reality, promoting equity of access and opportunity across the globe. A simple thought or idea can be another step towards freedom for all. Strive to act like these veterans and work towards building a better, brighter future for all. Thank you. As our celebration continues, please enjoy a video tribute to our community's veterans, accompanied by the wind ensemble performing the Armed Forces medley. Thank you.
thank you to Mrs. McCarthy and the Wind Ensemble for that excellent performance. It is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Captain Gina Martin. A member of IMSA's class of 1990, Captain Martin attended college at the U.S. Naval Academy. After graduating, she became a naval flight officer. Think Bob in Top Gun 2. In the S-3 Viking, a carrier-based anti-submarine airplane, serving for 8 years before she left her Navy. She now works as a commercial airline pilot based out of Denver and is a captain for Southwest. Captain Martin is a truly engaged IMSA alumna who, over the past year, has met with staff and students about joining a service academy or learning about a career in being a pilot. Please give a warm welcome home to Gina Martin.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Welcome, everybody, students, staff, faculty. Thanks for being here. Thanks to the band and the choir and the color guard. We didn't have anything like this in my day, and it's really kind of impressive to be here and see everyone showing up for this. Most veterans don't feel like we deserve all the acclaim, but there's just not that many of us. So it's nice to see everybody here today. So it became very apparent to me in my first 2 weeks at IMSA that I was far from one of the smarter kids here. In fact, I was probably in the bottom half if I'm going to be honest. And it became very obvious to me. I'd been a hotshot at my math team in my home school freshman year. Maybe some of y'all can relate. And I tried out for the IMSA math team. My first clue should have been the fact that there were 4 classrooms of people trying out. But nonetheless, I walked into the classroom with my geometry teacher, and she explained that she was going to hand out a test to us, and we had an hour to do this test. And the first question went pretty well. I was feeling pretty okay about it. And then I got to the second question. It was a lot harder. But I got the answer, and I got to the third question, and I couldn't do it. And I looked at the fourth question, and I didn't recognize the problem at all. And out of 20 questions on that test, I could do 2 of them. And I was all around me. Pencils are scratching on paper, people writing furiously. And I had no idea. And I stood up and walked to the front, and I put my test on Mrs. Kaminsky's desk, and she must have seen something in my face. Because I walked out of the room, and she followed me. And she said, Gina, are you okay? And I said, Mrs. Kaminsky, I don't belong here. And she kind of laughed and patted me on the shoulder, and she says, no, it's okay. She says, you have to understand that you're in geometry. Some of your classmates are in Calc 2. You just, maybe you need to just try something else. You're gonna find, your talents and your skills, and I even think you're pretty good at math. So 2 weeks in, I decided to try something else and take a different path. And I'd always been a space nerd. And one of my classmates had gone to a place that I really wanted to go to as a kid. He'd gone to a space camp in Space Academy. And I talked to him about it. He says, beg, borrow, steal the money, go. And so I went. And I finally made enough money babysitting and doing other stuff and convinced my parents. And man, they gave us a space shuttle operator's manual. It had fold-out pictures of all the cockpit diagrams and all the switches and checklists, and I fell in love. I decided right then my life's purpose, my goal, I had a dream. I wanted to become a NASA astronaut. The odds were a little bit longer than even me getting onto the IMSA math team though. So I decided to try and stack it in my favor, and I said, well, what's the path? What's the best way? And the best odds at that point were joining the US Navy, becoming a naval pilot, going to test pilot school. And back then, even in the late 80s, and even now still to this day, there's one school that has graduated more astronauts than any other school, and that's the United States Naval Academy. So I applied, and oh, great, okay. And I got the congressional nomination. It's many steps on the application, and I sympathize with all the seniors out there who are going through those college application processes right now. But I applied, and they turned me down medically. When I was a kid, I had 4 eye surgeries. It had never really affected me much other than the hospital time, but the Navy didn't like that so much. And I was devastated. And my first 2 years here at IMSA, I was roommates with a charter class student, and she'd graduated and gone off to Georgetown. I was depressed. This was my dream, and it had died before it even got off the launch pad. And I went out to visit her at Georgetown, and she slapped me upside the head and said, there's got to be a way. She was like, why are you giving up? And sure enough, there was a medical waiver that I could apply for. So I applied for the medical waiver, and they turned me down again. But now I'm like, well, we still got some time left before they make the class. So I applied for the medical waiver a second time, managed to talk to a Navy captain, fairly high ranking, and at one point he said to me, he says, you're a candidate? How did you get on my doctor line? Like, I don't know, I just went through the phone tree and somebody transferred me, and I wound up talking to the right guy. He gave me a medical waiver that day. So very lucky. Now I'm accepted, I'm on my way, my path is set. I'm gonna go become a naval aviator, Navy pilot, Top Gun, Tom Cruise, here I come. And it didn't quite work out that way. You know, you go to the Naval Academy, it's a high-stress environment, really hard work, a lot like IMSA. IMSA had prepared me really well for that, and I was having a great time. And my parents, meanwhile, so all the service academies are free. In fact, they actually pay you to go there, which came in very handy my freshman year because I needed somebody to pay me to be there for sure. But my parents had saved up a little bit of money for me to go to college. And they took a 18-year-old kid and they said, hey, are you gonna stay at this free college place? Yeah, I kind of like it. And they said, well, here's $12,000. Maybe you could go get a car and get your pilot's license. And sure enough, I was off to the races. And I absolutely fell in love with flying. I had a great time, got my pilot's license. Before my graduation, I took a whole bunch of my family flying. It was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. But the Navy was not so easy to talk into a pilot slot. They had a test for depth perception. I could have guessed and gotten more right. I was 0 for 15 on that thing. And there was no talking him into it this time. So instead, I wound up being a naval flight officer, working the weapons in the airplane, being the one in the airplane, not flying the airplane. We used to joke around that NFO stood for non-flying officer. But I went off to flight school, had a great time, did some formation stuff. The Navy is a very tough grader. It's kind of like the math classes here. You start out and everybody is average. And if you have a really great flight, you might get 1 above average on all the things that they graded you on. If you had a not so good flight, you'd probably get a below average. I was acing the program. Most of my flights came back with 1 above. Sometimes I'd come back with 2. Even one glorious day, I got 3 aboves in the flight. Never before heard of in the program. I was having a great time until they stuck me in a jet and bad day. It just didn't work out one day. And I not only got a below for the flight, I downed the flight. I had to redo it. Didn't crash or anything like that, but didn't successfully complete the flight. And the Navy is very, very strict. The first person in the class was going to get their choice. You know, and I thought when I became an NFO, I'm like, there's still a path. I could still get the EA-6B Prowler. I could still go to test pilot school. I could still get my dream of being an astronaut. And failed that one flight, and it came down to a week before I was to get my wings, and we got our assignments. And this determines the rest of your career in the Navy. What community you go in is typically the community you stay in. Are you going fighters? Are you going attack planes? Where are you going? I got the S-3B Viking. And night before we were to get our wings, everybody was out celebrating, and I'm sitting at the table, almost crying in my beer. And one of the instructors comes over to me and he says, Martin, what are you upset about? You're going to God's country. You're going to San Diego. You got the S3. It's a great platform. And I said, sir, don't you know the Russians pulled that dirty trick on us back in 1991? They went bankrupt. They stopped coming out to play. The S3 is an anti-submarine airplane. It has no more mission. There's nothing I can do. No more test pilot school. I could see my dream blowing up like a rocket right in front of me. And he says, well, you know, we all know you've torn up the program. You're a great pilot. He says, if you don't already have it, go get your multi-engine license. In the S3, you've got a stick and throttle on your side of the cockpit. You can fly that airplane. You can log those flight hours. Who knows where it's going to lead you? I'm like, oh, okay. And I went off to San Diego, and I put my head down, and I kept working, and I was still pretty depressed, adrift, just kind of soldiering on. But the Navy keeps you pretty busy. I got to do some pretty cool stuff, had a lot of fun. Went off to the carrier for the first time, did 17 carrier landings while I was in the airplane. Couldn't sleep for 2 days straight after that, so much adrenaline. It is really amazing what a bunch of the average age on the flight deck is like 18, 19 years old, and what that whole team is able to accomplish to make things happen is really, really cool. But I thought about what that instructor had said, and the Navy's on an 18-month cycle. You do 6 months of workups where you're going out to the carrier, but you're just off the coast of whatever shore you're based on, East Coast, West Coast, and you go out for 3 weeks, then you're home for 2 weeks. Good luck reintegrating. Go out for another 3.5 weeks, you're back home for 3 weeks, and they're preparing you to go on this 6-month cruise, which I would go on in September in 1997. Took the Nimitz around the world from 97 to 98. Started out in San Diego, just kept heading west, and had a really cool time. It was a lot of fun, but before I went on cruise, I managed to work, in between all that workups and everything else, channeled some of my IMSA study training skills, and I got my instrument rating and my multi-engine rating, and realized that I was having a lot of fun flying out in the civilian world. And, but 6 months of cruise, that'll get your attention to spending Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Eve on the boat. We were so long at sea that the Navy actually gave us a beer day. It popped 2 beers for us right on the ship after 45 days at sea and said, here you go, Lieutenant. But 60 days with the same 5,000 people, it's not a fun cruise. But I did love flying, and when it came to the end of that cruise, I kind of had a decision to make. I had a couple more years left in the Navy. I was going to go out and do my job, but I was back at that crux point of, I'm still adrift. What do I do with my life? And go for the civilian world or stay in the Navy? And September 2001, of course, the Twin Towers came down. Really, really hard day for everybody in the country, at least. And not a good time to jump into the airline world, but May the next year I decided to make the jump and go do that anyway. And decided to work as a flight instructor. Since I was not a Navy pilot, I couldn't go directly to the airlines. Had to work as a flight instructor for a little while, started out in the small airlines, had an absolute blast. Was loving that, taking people around to the important events in their life, meeting new folks every day, having a good time. And I started to realize, even though I didn't know it at the time, all those failures that I had, I never would have been a pilot without that initial dream. I was kind of shooting for the stars, didn't even quite make it to the moon, but I wound up well above the clouds. And, really good thing. Thanks for your time here today. And remember, even if your life doesn't turn out exactly as you thought it was going to when you're 17, you can still wind up in a pretty cool place. And enjoy your friendships with everybody here today, because you will have those friends, guarantee you, for the rest of your life. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Captain Martin, for sharing your journey. I love how you constantly talked about that you were pursuing a dream. I loved how you talked about that you confronted obstacles. They're natural as part of our life, and you persisted through them. And I think that resonates so much with being an IMSA student and what lies ahead for them in their future, whichever career path they choose. As we come to this end of this very special Veterans Day Assembly, let's take a moment to reflect on the significance of this day. Today we're gathered not just as students, staff, and faculty, but as a community bound by gratitude and respect for those who have selflessly served our country. To the veterans in our audience and all who are watching from home, thank you for your service. To everyone else, let's be inspired by their example and work towards making our world a better place, worthy of sacrifices made by these extraordinary men and women. I'd like to thank Maggie for serving as our host, Raghav for his message, our choir and wind ensemble, our color guard, and special thank you to Captain Martin for his service and for being with us today. Let's give them all a round of applause. At this time, I'd like to ask everyone to please stand once more and ask Michael to come back up to the podium to retire the colors as we close out the program.
Color guard, assemble. Color guard, prepare to retrieve the colors. Color guard, retrieve the colors. Color guard, return to rank. Color guard, about face. Color guard, forward march. Color guard, halt. Color guard dismissed. May the audience please be seated.